Welcome to How I Got Here, hosted by seasoned educator Jeremy Proper. This is a podcast of conversations with his former students discussing their journey from middle school to where they are today. Guests highlight their successes and the life lessons learned along the way. And now let's welcome the host, Jeremy Proper.
Welcome to How I Got Here with Mr. Proper. I will be talking to former students who will tell their stories of their personal journey from Mr. Proper's class, aka Club 128, to where they are now. Everyone has a different path to get to where they are now, and that path may just be the beginning to where they actually want to be. In these podcasts, I hope to tap into the journeys that my former students have taken, and for that matter, to share their experiences with my current students. Anyone else who is interested in seeing how hard work in and out of the classroom actually pays off. Let's welcome today's guest, Annie McGrath. Hi, Annie. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Well, let's just start off with, I know my intro says my former students. Annie is not actually my former student. Annie is now actually a colleague of mine. Annie works at Don Estridge with me. She teaches 8th grade U.S. history. And I thought it would be a great idea to have one of the current teachers come on and tell their story. So, how you doing this morning, Annie? What's going on?
I'm good. I just had a busy weekend of going back to sorority alumni events, which is something I'd love to talk about throughout the podcast that helped me succeed in college. So, doing
Excellent.
good.
That is one thing that I know my wife is near and dear to her heart. She was in a sorority at the University of Maryland, and oh my gosh, she has like a gazillion sisters, and it is definitely a wonderful thing when you go to college. And I think that would be something great to talk about because I don't know if many of these kids really exactly know fraternity, sorority life. Well, that's awesome. So let's just jump in. So why don't you take a little bit of time to discuss with my students about where you went to middle school, where you actually, in this case, where you grew up, where you're from, where you went to high school, where you went to college, and what you're currently doing now.
Okay, so I am from Illinois, Northern Illinois. It's technically unincorporated, but I like to say that I'm from a town named Wakanda, actually, spelled differently.
Wakanda? Oh my gosh, what a coincidence.
Yeah, it's spelled differently, but the town loves to run with that and take pictures, and they love Black Panther and things like that.
Of course, why wouldn't they? It's a very unusual name, and now it's in a hugely popular franchise movie series.
Yeah, so I'm from Wakanda, but I went to school in Mundelein, which is the town over. And I didn't move school districts until I graduated high school, so I was in the same school system, kindergarten through 12th grade, which was great.
Nice.
But I went to elementary school at Fremont. I went to middle school at Fremont Middle School. And then I went to Mundelein High School, which was totally public. And then off to Florida Atlantic University, also public. So I've only ever known public education. Wow. And that's why it's really close to my heart, because I know how much impact it can have for the students in it.
So since you're a Fighting Illini from the great state of Illinois, what drew you down here to South Florida? What was the reasoning? I always love to ask people that aren't from here, like, why would you want to go here?
My mom went to Florida Atlantic University for one semester, and she transferred back because she found the environment too distracting.
Not surprising.
No,
did you know of any school in Florida? FAU technically is the closest to the beach of any Florida school.
You know, I did know that because on my tour, they talk a lot about that.
They brought it up.
That's like the main selling
Please
point.
come to our school. The beach is right here. That's so funny.
Yeah, but I was pretty much set to go to University of Cincinnati.
Nice.
Which is a lot closer to where I grew up. But I toured FAU in January, and I'm not sure if you've been to Illinois in January, but
I have. It's awful.
Yeah, I used to shed a tear walking into school from my car because it was so cold.
Yeah, but the problem is it froze.
Yeah, it did freeze on my face. So I toured in January, and I took a flight down with my mom. Like, we flew in one morning, and then we flew back up the next morning. It was super fast.
Wow.
But we toured, and we went to Deerfield Beach.
Oh, nice.
After our tour, and we just stood on the pier, and I couldn't believe that people really lived here. That this is the thing, because I'd never been outside of Lake County, Illinois, to
That
think
was
that
your
I could
first,
live anywhere
that
else.
was your first real trip?
No. I just never thought like anyone could live anywhere else. Like that's
Oh,
the only place that I lived.
oh, that was your reality. That's all
So,
that you knew.
right. Yeah. I traveled a lot, but I never thought that people could move to a place like that. That
Well,
was,
you're still young and you're trying to figure things out. And exactly, Illinois is a little bit. Where you were. It wasn't very city. It was very rural because, as
right.
we've discussed, when you were there, you were big into what horse event? What was your thing that you really enjoyed to do? Please discuss that.
Right. So, I grew up on a horse farm, and again, I was there until I was 18. But it was a pretty secluded dressage farm. My parents are both dressage trainers. So I grew up with a pony and then I had horses, but I really took it for granted because it was there. And I try and tell that to my students a lot is, look around at where you live. Like the things around you are amazing and the opportunities you have. And it doesn't seem special because it's around and it's always
Right.
there for you.
Right.
And that's how it was for horses for me.
Now,
I was
weren't you a little blown away that I actually knew what dressage was? I remember the first time you told me, and I was like, I know what that is. And you're like, no, you don't. And I'm like, it's horse dancing. And you're like, how do you know that? I'm like, I try to be cultured. It's not like I do it, but I want to
yeah.
know what things are. And you blew me away because I never met anybody who had done it before. So I was like, how do I even know what this is? I don't know anybody who does it. I don't know anybody who owns a horse. But
Yeah. No, it's
that's
not
cool.
common. It's probably the least common kind of riding in the US at least. Because a lot of people do hunter jumper, which I'm sure you know
Right.
because you
Yes.
know what dressage is. But
Yes.
my dad was trained in Germany when he was my age. He lived in Germany and trained with their Olympic team trainer. So he came back to the US and sort of brought dressage to the area that wasn't previously there.
Wow. So he was an innovator.
Yeah, and he was, oh my gosh, my dad was so cool. He did the traveling Lipizzan show. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, what's
before.
that?
It's this group of white horses and the riders put on these funny outfits and they do all these tricks. They like jump up into the air.
Oh, I have heard of that. I just didn't know what it was called. You're right.
Yeah.
I did know what that was. I just didn't know what it was called. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that there was all this, amazing dressage that's really unique to the area happening in my backyard. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's cool, but I want to be a cheerleader.
Right, exactly. Well, I explain the exact same thing to my students. I grew up 10 minutes from New York City, and this comes up every 9/11. I have gone by the Twin Towers thousands of times. I never stood one time in the building anywhere ever. And we all take it for granted. And the other thing is, the only reason I ever went to the Statue of Liberty because was a 4th grade trip and we went there. Otherwise, I would say the same thing. I know where it is. I've seen it a million times. I never went. Well, you take things for granted that are in your face, that are right there all the time. And then as soon as you leave, you're like, oh, I miss that so much. And it takes a minute to realize what you had and now that it's gone. That's incredible. I really appreciate that deep dive into what makes Annie Annie. So first off, thank you so much for coming on and telling my students about your life and your experiences. So going to education, yes, you were not educated in the state of Florida, but how did Annie get excited for learning? What was that moment that you can remember where the light bulb just went on and maybe it was a subject, it was a teacher, maybe it just could have been a project. Was there something that was that light bulb moment for you that turned on the light to be inspired for education?
Yes, so it was my 9th grade honors English class. And I just found out he still works at the school. I've got to reach out to him, but Mr. Dreyer in 9th grade. So I, in middle school, was never in any advanced classes. I always felt like, not to sound pompous, but I felt like I was too advanced for some of the classes I was in middle school. So school was a little boring. But when I got to high school and I started taking honors and AP classes, it made me realize that the things that your peers and you can discuss with your classmates about a reading or about a subject, it can change your perspective on things and you can hear really insightful opinions. It changed my opinion of school around because you can learn things and not just from a textbook, but from other people.
In my opinion, that's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
We all have our opinion, But this is what makes us good learners, is when we can stop, look, and listen to other people and then absorb what they're saying. And maybe it's enough to change my opinion to understand where they're coming from. And that's where the higher thought process, the higher thinking happens, because you can only go so far with what you think. But when you're with other people, all of a sudden it makes a huge difference because you're hearing something that you didn't think of. That's an amazing point.
Yeah, and it also, because it was my first honors class, I was used to not really having to do any work at home. And I had a C my first semester of this class, which was super low for me.
Oh, boy.
And I talked to Mr. Dreyer, and he just, told me there's some more effort involved in being an honors class. So I turned it around, and I didn't end with a C. But it was the fact that you can be excited for class, but, you also have to do the work that goes into it. And going off of that, then again in 12th grade, when I was a senior, I was in AP Literature, which was difficult. But my teacher believed in us so strongly, and it was a very small class because once you took AP Language, some seniors just didn't want to go further.
No, they didn't want to waste their time either. As a senior, I don't want to take that.
Right. But I love literature, so it was a small class, and we had the best conversations every day. I had it first period, I still remember. And we read Othello, and we had to do all of these super close reading assignments and bunch of essays, and I hated in the moment, but at the end you got to produce something you worked so hard on and you're so proud of, no matter what the grade was. I remember being proud that I had taken the time to really closely read this piece of literature that so many people have looked over, but not a lot of people have really looked that hard into. And also she told me that I reminded her of a fairy in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I'll never forget that.
Oh, boy. There you go. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Complimenting and saying Midsummer Night. I mean, that's the best you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. We get into a certain class. Like for me, obviously it was history. I'm a history teacher, and I just loved it. And for me, it was like I did a reenactment. My mom insists this is the story, that I went to the Fort Lee Historical Park, in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And I came home and I smelled like wood because I was in charge of cooking, and I was cooking in this huge cauldron of a pot for everyone. And people got to go with reenactors. People got to shoot the muskets. Of course, I was a little boy. I wanted to shoot the musket. But my mother said I came home, and because the history came alive for me, I was so interested that that's the springboard. And we all have it. Now, obviously, if you're in 8th grade or a middle schooler, you probably haven't found it yet. So there's no reason to fret, because it takes a minute. And sometimes it changes, or we realize I like this for my personal thing, but maybe that's not what I want to do with the rest of my life. So it's a very unraveling thing. Well, thank you for explaining that. Now, I know you said those classes, were those teachers as well, or is there a teacher that just stands out for you who was like helping you with something that you went, oh my gosh, without them, I wouldn't have springboarded forward?
Yes, so I have a few, actually. I talked about Mr. Dreyer, and Miss Garcia was my AP Literature teacher. But in 8th grade, my school introduced choir. We didn't have choir in school. I was already in an outside of school choir for many years, but Mrs. Petway was a first year at Fremont my 8th grade year, and I had struggled previously with not telling anybody I was in choir because I thought it was so nerdy, for lack of a better term.
You kept that one under your hat. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to get made fun of, so I didn't really talk about choir. But once it was introduced as like a class you could take for a whole period in school, I loved it so much. And she gave me the director's award, actually, which was crazy because
that's prestigious.
It was encouragement that was needed at the time to not feel bad that what I loved to do, I didn't think was socially the thing to do. I was also on POMS, dance team at the same time. So I was trying to hide it from my POMS teammates that I was in choir. So now, having a
this is so amazing because this is a true middle school problem.
Yeah.
that kids, and thank you for sharing and opening up. I really appreciate that, because we all do things that we're embarrassed of. Yeah. We like it, but we don't want our peers to find out, because ultimately we're afraid that they're going to make fun of us. And I'm just so blown away that your school didn't have a choir. And then luckily for you, it happened while you were there, because it could have happened 1 year removed and you never would have had the chance. So for
Right.
you, it was happenstance, and it was all happening at the right place at the right time, as usually things do when we find our passion, whatever that may be. It's funny because you just made me have a memory that I haven't had in a really many long years. I remember when I was a kid and mountain bikes first came out. And it's exactly what you're talking about. One of my friends had a mountain bike, and I would constantly make fun of him because I was a road bike guy. I was always riding my road bike. I'm like, this is awesome. I can go fast and da 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 da. And my friend is like, you got to try this. I'm like, oh, that thing looks stupid. This is dumb. Why are you doing this? And he's like, just get on the thing and ride it. And I was like, nope, nope, nope. Made fun of him, made fun of him. Finally, I don't know. He bet me I wouldn't ride it. So of course I'm a boy. I would not take a dare. So I got on the bike and I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever ridden in my entire life. What have I been doing? And that's it. Like we're so sometimes our own worst enemy, getting in the way of something good for us. And yet, though, you don't want to necessarily in middle school say that, because you don't want to be made fun of, or like you said, you don't want to be the singing nerd or the band or whatever it's called, whatever the mean names that people say. It's like, look, I like to do this. I'm sorry you don't, but why is this bad? But in middle school, very few are willing to do that, to put themselves out there and be like, okay, I'm going to school with pink hair today, and I just don't care what anybody says.
Right. And with that being said, and how she gave me an award and, really encouraged me, I ended up just fully accepting and loving the stereotype, I guess, of being just the nerdy choir kid, because I went to high school and I had the best director, Mr. Neubauer, and I had him for my first and second years of high school. And I just totally accepted show choir, and that became my entire personality.
Nice.
Which came back, recently in full swing to do great things for me in my future. And I had the best experience, but I wouldn't have probably had the same amazing time in high school that I had if I had let those opinions in middle school that choir wasn't something I should pursue and I should do something cool like volleyball, something that I didn't want to necessarily do just to look cool.
So then I want to transition. What you're saying now is all of a sudden reminding me. Do you think that this choir and this acting is what gave you the confidence to go try out to become Miss South Florida Fair? Do you think that was a real instrumental help? Did you think about that?
100%. I don't think that it's something that would even cross my mind if I hadn't done choir. And this is because my best friend in high school, Sheridan, I met her in show choir, and she competed for the Miss America system all throughout high school. So first of all, I wouldn't even have known about
any of
the
this
system. Yeah, I would have no idea if I didn't know her. So, and I met her through choir. But performing, especially starting at, a turbulent age, like 14.
Oh yeah, the last thing you want to do is be on a stage in front of people embarrassing yourself.
Right. Yeah, I understand it takes a certain type of personality to even want to do that in the first place. But because I had been performing on stage, 7th and 8th grade in the musicals, and then up through high school doing show choir, musicals, and my outside of school choir, I just would not have had the confidence, I think even the confidence to be a teacher, because a lot of students don't understand that teaching is sort of like performing on a stage, because you're in front of a large group. When you count all your students, I think mine's right around 120.
Right.
And obviously they're in smaller groups, but putting yourself out there, it's performing for me was the most influential thing I could have done for myself. And I'm thankful every day that I didn't let that negative view socially of performing arts get in the way of what I wanted to do. Because like you said, I would have never even known what pageants were. And most of the scoring comes from your talent, which mine is vocal performance, which is all, tied up in choir. But it taught me
that original training, right?
Right. It taught me how to look like you're composed on stage, how to not look nervous, what to wear, tips and tricks, how to do your hair and makeup, how to project what people look for when you're on stage, because we did a lot of working with each other, watching each other and giving advice, how to dance. I learned how to dance in show choir a lot. And as you know, I coach dance now. So.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like that this was setting you up from your childhood to your adult choice, that without this decision that you were hesitant to make, and thank goodness you did, you may have never done this because you might have not had what it took. It's funny, you brought up another interesting thought that one day I remember my wife says to me, how do you deal with the fact that when you're giving a lecture, I'm not going to say 100% of the kids are watching you 100% of the time, but most of the kids are visually engaging with you. They're having eye contact with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm a boy. I don't think that deeply about anything. So I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, how does that not creep you out that you have, 25 or 30 sets of eyes watching you as you walk around the room, listening to you? You're a charismatic guy. You have a really strong voice. People listen. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So the next day I went to school and I paid attention to it, and it totally freaked me out. I was like, what? Like, I didn't even realize what she was talking about because I'm like, this is just part of my job. And this is, I don't know. I'm also this false believer that what I do and what people react to me is what everyone does and what everyone gets. And apparently I'm wrong and I'm an anomaly and whatever. But it was just like the same thing. I just get up and do my thing. And then it shocked me that people are actually paying attention. People are hinging on every word that I say and listening. And it's like, whoa. So you're right. It is a performance every day. And you have to be knowledgeable in what it is that you do. And you have to be able to answer on the fly questions. Like, in what other job does somebody ask you an off the wall question that more than likely has nothing to do with the content, but you still feel like you should engage with this person and answer it? Like as an engineer, people aren't doing that to you. It's engineering and that's it. But as a teacher, you can get any question at any time and you're expected to know the answer to just about everything on the planet. So that's a really interesting thing that your previous childhood experiences actually prepared you for something that now you're fully involved in. And so what was your competition like? Like or better yet, what was the process for you to get into this competition? And then the second part is, what was the competition like? So how did you jump into this?
Well, tying back on what you just said, that students can ask you any question at any time. The best preparation I had for the onstage question, which is everyone's, everybody wants to see what the girls are going to say. I could not think of a better method of preparation than teaching middle school for an onstage question scenario, because I knew deep down that whatever question they would ask me was not going to be as out of pocket as what one of my 8th graders would ask me on any given day.
Yes, right. You're prepared for anything already because of having a year's worth of teaching. Exactly.
Right. But to start at the beginning, I just saw, it's, not that exciting, but I saw an ad on Facebook that the Miss South Florida Fair competition was looking for contestants. And I saw this, I think, late September. And it was sort of in the back of my mind. I didn't apply right away because I didn't really know if it was something I could feasibly do. And I didn't have a recent headshot. Like, I didn't have a professional pageant headshot. And I thought that was going to seal the deal that I couldn't even do it.
Wow.
But, I thought about it for a month or two. And I knew I would need a social impact initiative, which I've done, community service in different places and ways, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to make my personal mission, because I need a statement and I need a centralized goal. And I couldn't just say, help people, like which people, so
that's a little vague.
Yeah, I had to kind of narrow down what I wanted to do. And I ended up going to it's called Girls Coordinating Council of Palm Beach County. They had a conference on one of the professional development days. And I found out through our faculty newsletter that we get every week that it was just kind of thrown in there, like close to a page break. You could miss it. But I saw Girls Coordinating Council. I thought that sounds like something that I would want to do. So I went, and it was, community leaders and different businesses. Pace Center for Girls, I'm not sure if you've heard, but it's an alternative school. And they had girls who are currently students at Palm Beach County high schools talking about how being a girl affects their education. And I knew immediately that would be my social impact.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, I was like, this is awesome. And I remember
me.
I challenged myself to say something during the seminar. I raised my hand. I said, to the high school girl presenting, like, how can I, help my girls that are going through these things you're talking about, pressure, social media pressure, worrying about looking pretty instead of worrying about your work. And she just said to just like communicate that you're there for them. And I knew that if I made this my social impact, that they would know that I was there for them, that this is my personal mission. And it aligned just so well with my entire past and, how I want to leave a legacy of just being a supportive educator and person, community member. So, and then I went to get really into the details. I was driving up to Disney that weekend for my best friend's birthday, and we took the car ride to create a name for my initiative, which I ended up going with the United State of Girl.
Oh, wow.
Because my ultimate goal is my ultimate goal to take girls from every community and make them see that we're all pretty similar. And
right. It doesn't matter where you grew up.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter where you grew up. We've all had the same experiences. We've all had problems with, society telling us we need to dress like this. We need to wear these clothes. We need this makeup. We need. Because boys don't really have that. We don't have that same social pressure of we have to look pretty and we have to wear these clothes. And if I don't have this, I'm not that. And it's in everything. It's in movies. It's in TV. It's in commercials. And now the social media is crazy, like you alluded to. So it's definitely a more challenging area for girls than it is definitely for boys, and having a champion in yourself to try to help these kids understand. Because like I said earlier, I've tried to do that, but I think it doesn't come off as well from a male as it would from a female. So I try, but I think many of them look at me and they're like, what does he know about being a girl? I'm like, well, I have been married about twice as long as you've been alive, so I have a little bit of a clue. I have some insider information from that lady I've been married to for a long time.
Yeah.
So, but I think that coming from a woman who has had your own personal experiences with, these problems, they're probably more apt to listen. And now using this new platform of Miss South Florida Fair, that allows you to get that message out to so many more people.
Yeah. And so I came up with my social impact. I made a public page. And I volunteer tutor at the Women's Center in Boynton Beach.
Nice.
And so my impact statement is not just girls, because the woman that I tutor is, older than me, but my impact statement is empowering women and girls to succeed through education and support. So how I do that currently is by tutoring May. I love her, but she just relocated here from Hong Kong.
Oh,
so
wow.
We talk about how to, just the other day we talked about applying for financial aid at community college. It's not always explicitly English that someone would need help with. It's, America is confusing.
Money. Yeah, you need money to survive here in America. You don't have money. So we
talk about everything. It's more of like a mentorship program, and I'm trying to expand it out some more. But so I found my social impact, and then I started volunteering at this center, and I did a lot of research. There's a policy center in Tallahassee that looks up how girls and women's education in Florida changes throughout the years, dropout rates, literacy rates, reasons that they would feel uncomfortable in school.
Wow, and you're doing a deep dive.
Yeah. So I started to come up with how I can translate what's going on to the judges that might not be in public schools right now. But other than my social impact, I had to obviously get a dress.
Yes.
And my talent, again, I didn't take that much preparation at all, because it was my senior year show choir solo competition song, because I wanted to go with something that I knew I wouldn't forget the words to.
You already knew it. It wasn't going away. It was like, I need to practice once or twice and I'm good.
Right. Yeah. I ended up just singing it in my car like once a day before it happened. And that I had gotten already direction on from my past choir teachers. So the most preparation went into making my social impact.
I'm sorry, I have to ask, what was the song called?
It was called Greenfinch and Linnetbird. It's from Sweeney Todd.
Ah, yes, Sweeney Todd. Now we're talking.
Yeah,
that's
a
play.
Cool song too.
That is a really cool song. That's a really good one. Awesome. Yeah. I'm sorry, I just had to ask. I'm like, I want to know what it is.
It was a fun song, but that was all my preparation. And the preparation I wasn't prepared for was that we had a lot of rehearsals. Like, I want to say 2.5 weeks of rehearsals that I would go to the fairgrounds pretty much every day after teaching. And I met the most inspiring group of young women who were the competitors. There was 14 of us. And I met people doing all sorts of different things. My Miss Palm Beach County, because 2 people were crowned, including me, and then Miss Palm Beach County is Caroline Smith. And she does so much impactful work in Boca Raton, which I didn't even know about until I met her, that there was so many, community outreach things happening.
This is what I find the most interesting. And you really didn't allude to this very strongly, but we talked about this in the past. You've never done this before.
Right.
This is the first foyer into this. This is the first time you've ever done this before, and yet you won. That is unbelievable. Hold on. I got to give you applause for that. I just don't think that the listeners understand this. This isn't something that Annie has done before. She just decided, I want to do this and try this, and then she won it. So that's an unbelievable accomplishment for someone who's never done it before. But as she stated, she did practice and prepare for this her whole life, just not realizing this was the end result that it was going to turn into.
Exactly. Yeah, I just sort of, and a lot of it had to do with Sheridan, my friend that I talked about from show choir. I reached out to her and pretty much just said, what's your, give me some speed coaching, because I can't, I only have a month or 2.
Catch me up. Yeah,
but we had some mock interviews where, honestly, there's not a lot of preparation you can do specifically for pageants. It's mostly, how can you present yourself? How strong are you in knowing who you are, which I think is why I won. I credit just that I have a really strong, I have a lot of confidence in myself, intrinsic confidence, and I know who I am, what I stand for, and I'm comfortable presenting myself on stage. I think that's all the preparation I needed, was just an internal grounding of who I am and what I want to get across to the judges and the audience. And I think that translated, especially that night, and because my best friends were there and I just kept pretending I was performing for them.
And that's what you do. That was the advice I was given as a 13-year-old when I had to stand up in front of 400 people to perform my bar mitzvah. It's like, just get to know the people that are there, and you feel like, okay, I'm just talking to people that I know. Obviously, I didn't know everybody who was there, but the people who were up front, I knew all of them, and I didn't look beyond row 5 or 6. And I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of talking a foreign language to my friends who all have to do this as well. And then it makes it so much easier. It is interesting because I had a student who was in my class who was doing pageants when I was teaching in Miami. And she was able to actually turn that into a career, where she then went to Macy's and would show the young girls how to walk, how to dress, how to put on makeup, how to do all that. And then that turned into like a side hustle. And then she started doing adult pageants. And this is something that I had known about prior to you, but hadn't thought about it until all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, my student Kelly used to do that. Give her a shout out, Kelly Sachs. And she used to do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's how I was able to talk to you about it. And then she parlayed that. I have another young woman who in my class started to get into makeup, and Instagram had just started. And Mayrob decided that she wanted to do this. And now she gets free makeup from like all these cosmetic companies to do all this stuff. And I tell the kids, you never know what you do now could turn into a side hustle, or it even could turn into your actual job. You don't know.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and I have to give credit to my pageant director, Teresa Lepore, and all of the committee members. It was definitely the best possible pageant I could have had for my first competition, because we had the rehearsals, like I told you about, and they gave us pointers about how we can essentially do better on stage before the big day. And the rehearsals, what it really did for me was be able to see how it's going to come together on stage before the night of. And without that, I think I would have been so much more nervous.
I don't think people understand that. I don't think let's take the Super Bowl and Rihanna. Do you honestly believe that she just went out there on stage and got on those mega lifting things? I'm like, I don't even want to go on there. And there's a lot of behind the scenes preparations that people don't get. It's just like, if you did poorly on Mr. Proper or Miss McGrath's last test, you should probably go home and study the next time, because whatever it didn't work. Well, it's the same thing. You're not going to perform in front of hundreds, thousands, or millions of people without having hours of preparation. Same thing with musicians. I don't care how many times they played, what is it? Taylor Swift. I'm sure with what's the song I always quote in class? Oh, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. She still has to practice and warm up before she gets on in front of 40,000 people. People just don't get that. They think, oh, they're so great. No, they have vocal exercises, vocal coaches. They have to do all of these things. Some people like to gargle. Some people don't like to talk at all. So it's like there's always preparation for everything. And thank you for bringing that up. So transitioning back, now I was going to ask this question, but I think it's a little different for you because the question really is, if you could turn back time and tell your 8th grade self some advice, what would you tell them? But my question to you, actually, I want to change it. Or maybe, I don't know, I want to ask it. Do you feel like now that you teach 8th grade, do you feel like you're giving these young ladies advice to try to help move them forward? That's really what I think is a good question for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that that's the question you asked because I sort of feel like in a lot of ways where I am right now, I wouldn't want to change anything. And the advice that I give them is that struggle is good. And you learn from, when you might stumble or you might find yourself in a social situation that you don't like. If your friends are going in a direction that you don't want to follow, it's really hard, but you have to find a good foundation within yourself, which translates back to, again, struggle is good. What were you going to say?
The struggle is real.
Yeah. But it's good because you learn from what's going on and you find it in yourself to figure out, what happened? How can I help myself? And I'm an only child. So when I had social issues going on in school, I couldn't really go to anyone. Like,
you didn't have a brother or sister to cry on their shoulder.
Yeah.
Go
love my parents, but they didn't understand the social world of 14-year-olds.
No. I don't think a lot of people do. Even 14-year-olds don't get it.
Yeah. So the advice that I try and give them is just, it's okay to struggle in something. It's okay to fail a test. Right. It's okay to, maybe have a falling out with your friend group and find a new one. I did that in 7th grade and I'm still friends with the girls that I became friends with because they were much more aligned with, things that would make us successful in the future, which we all are now. And I can't say the same for the girls that were so, concerned about looking cool all the time in middle school.
But it doesn't sound like it was a failure to me. It sounds like it's something that just ran its course, came to an end, and then you found your forever, like when you adopt a dog, your forever home, you found your forever friends. And that's what we need to do sometimes. It's happened to everybody. That happened to me in 6th grade. I used to hang out with a bunch of kids. All they did was get in trouble, and then they would blame me. And finally, after they did something really bad that I wasn't even there for, my parents are like, you can't be friends with these people anymore. And I'm like, they live in the neighborhood. They go to my school. How am I supposed to find a new friend group in 6th grade at 11? And sure enough, like you said, I did. And like you said, these people have been my lifelong friends there for me my whole life. And I still talk to them to this day. So it's the struggle is real, like I said. And when you're living it, you can't see the forest beyond the trees. And you can't see how this is going to turn out and be good, but it will. You just have to stay the course and believe because Annie and Mr. Proper, we've all experienced these things to a different level, greater, lesser, but we've all come out on top. You just have to realize this is the now. It will get better. And I know that's cliche. It will get better when there's no like stopwatch going in 4 years, 3 months, 2 days, and 32 seconds. It will get better. It does, but you don't realize it until it actually happens. And that's amazing. So now you have this group of 8th grade girls that you can reach. And you were probably doing this well before your pageantry. And it's just, again, it's this collision of right place at right time with the right motivation and with your own personal message. And now you have let's just call it 50%. So let's say you're 60 to 65 girls that you're teaching every year, you can bestow this kind of information, which is amazing because I'm sorry, I just don't feel like there are really enough young women role models for younger girls to look up to and go, well, if she could do that, why can't I do that? And I think you're an amazing role model for these young girls to look up to and to say, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. And you saying, I stepped out of my comfort zone and I was doing choir on the side because I didn't want anybody to know. But now I can do it. And look what it did for you 10 years later. Now you're Miss South Florida Fair. That's amazing. So the sky is the limit. And the only thing that limits us is us. And I can do it. I'm going to find a way. And that's amazing. And I really appreciate you going that in depth and sharing. So what was it, that C that you mentioned in that AP class? Was that your most challenging educational experience, or was it something else? And how did you overcome that?
I have two at different stages of education. My most challenging academic moment was freshman year geometry class. I share with my students that I am not a math girl.
That's why I just social studies.
Yeah, it just does not work for me. And oh my gosh, this is so dramatic. If there's one thing about me, it's that I'm dramatic. But I remember crying during a test.
Oh, wow.
And I asked to go to the bathroom so that I could cry after looking at this geometry test. And I called my dad in the bathroom. And I just said, I'm so sorry that I'm such a failure, that I can't do this geometry test. And my dad, my sweet, sweet dad, I love him so much. But he on the phone was like, you're not a failure. Like, what do you mean? You're doing all of these things.
He's literally talking you off the ledge in the bathroom.
Yes, genuinely.
Oh, Dad. Yes. Let's hear it for dads everywhere. Yay.
Yes. And he just kept saying, do your best. It's okay. And he couldn't believe that I was saying these, but I'm really hard on myself. And I see that in so many of my students, especially because I teach, really high performing students, that it's so hard to get in your own head. But I worked with a teacher a lot. I got through geometry, which was the hardest math class I've ever taken, including college. I don't know why. Wow.
Because math, algebra, you're either good at algebra or you're good at geometry. You're not good at both. And your brain just doesn't work that way. There's like 0.01% of the human population that can do great in both. The rest of us, we're good at one or the other. So algebra was fine for me. And geometry is like, what? Wait, you just started to add shapes and numbers? Now I'm really confused. So
I was the same way. And I need to reach out to that teacher at some point and just apologize for leaving teardrops on his tests. But
as if he even remembers, because he's probably so used to that, because that happens mostly in math, where kids are like, I just don't understand this. History is just memorization. Math is application. So it's a little bit more challenging.
Right. And I share that with my students too. We just had a difficult test, and I shared my story of, in that geometry class, I got a 0% on a test once after answering each question and doing all of the work. Still got a 0%.
Wow. I thought my educational experience was bad. I don't think I've ever had that. That's incredible. And thank you for sharing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, because you're not the only one. And I'm sure this has happened to somebody else who's going to go, holy crap, this lady became a teacher and she got a 0 on something that she tried hard on.
Yeah, no, I ended up doing like test corrections and working with the teacher. And I did okay in the class in the end, but that's that story. And then moving on to a different step in my academic career in college, I joined my sorority right away, and I sort of forgot about schoolwork as it goes.
As does college when you join a sorority. That is not an uncommon practice.
And my sorority had nothing to do. I was just distracted personally. But what I'm so grateful for is that they kept me accountable. My sorority, ended up on academic probation.
That's very common.
For my sorority.
Wait. We have to dive into that for the children. That means that she got poor grades. We've all been there at some point. I was on it too, so I don't want you to feel like she's the only one. Most of us have been there because we go from high school to real life in college, and now you're in charge. And we all tend to mess that up. So academic probation is kind of like a warning that if you don't get your act together, they're then going to tell you, well, it depends on the school. Sometimes you then have to take a semester off and then come back. It all depends. It's not like you're getting kicked out, but you're going to have to take a time out. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. It was academic probation through the sorority. So I had okay grades, but they wanted us to get good grades. I think I had like 2 C's, and that meant that I was on academic probation.
Yeah, exactly.
So and everybody around me was like, oh, C's get degrees. Like, don't even worry about it. But then I couldn't go to any social functions in my sorority for a semester.
Well, but that's good though, because they had
Yeah.
standards. It wasn't just like, okay, join, take your money, and whatever your grades are, who cares? You
Right.
know,
And academics have always been important to me. I love school. And being on academic probation just with Sigma Kappa made me realize that I needed to recenter my priorities and
hunker
remember
down,
that.
really get started and do what you're supposed to.
Yeah.
But
Remember that I'm here for school.
not every fraternity or sorority works that way. I know my buddy,
Mhm.
he was at Rutgers, the same thing. Like every day for an hour to 2 hours, they had mandatory study time, and the whole
Yep.
house would shut down. And the older brothers who were seniors would walk around, and if you were messing around watching TV, listening to music, they came in, they turned it off, and they were really, really difficult because they did not want to lose their academic standing at the university by saying, oh, you guys are just partying all the time and you're not taking this academic seriously. And they're like, no, we have the highest GPA on campus and we don't want to blow that. So it is important. And I'm glad that this particular group did it. That's amazing to hear. I'm glad that they're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, so, no, it was so nice to just have that reminder, that push, like an older sister that I never had.
Right.
You know, to be like, child. Remember why you're here. And then I never had an issue with my grades after that. I did come into college as international business and switch to social science education after that semester too. Oh, so it was more of it forced me to think about, why am I hating school? Because I usually love school.
I'm taking the wrong classes.
So, yeah, so I definitely credit Sigma Kappa with just keeping me in school, because if I hadn't gotten that wake-up call, you know, who knows? I would have just maybe not even come back to class one day because I didn't
just gave
know
up.
why I hated it. I didn't think about why I wasn't succeeding like I normally do. So, but that was my biggest challenge. And then I got most improved academics the next semester.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It's almost like from zero to hero. That's incredible. Yeah. Wow. So my next question goes along with this. How then did Annie relax? What was her downtime when, like you said, you went to high school, you were taking these harder classes, and then you went to college and it was getting a little more challenging? What was your relax? I know you enjoyed dressage when you were home. Obviously, your horse didn't go to school with you, so you couldn't do that. But what was Annie's downtime, relax time?
So I'm a big fan of taking naps, almost to a fault. So definitely napping. But also,
have you seen that skit on Saturday Night Live with Andy Samberg? And I took a nap.
Relatable. I don't think I have, but that's relatable to me.
Oh yeah, you got to look it up. It's hilarious. All he's doing is rapping about taking a nap. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, that's me.
That's you.
I also really love reading, like free choice fiction reading. Whatever I want to is a big sort of escape. It's relaxing and I enjoyed to do it. And I wish that I try and instill this in my students. And it's Read Across America week next week. And I'm going to try and talk about that with my students, about how reading, opens doors. But that is something else I did. I also am a big yoga girl.
Nice.
I love yoga.
My wife loves that too.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Why is it that, I don't know, I have to ask, why do you think that more women are into yoga than men? Why is that? Because I remember once my wife was like, you have to come to yoga and see what this is all about. And I walked in the room and I was the only dude in the room. And I'm like, well, if I was a single guy, this would be an interesting place. But why is it seem that yoga is so much more open to women wanting to do it than necessarily men? Have you ever thought about that? I
have. And it's a social thing. It's just like some societal whatever decided that it was women's workout. But actually there's some men that take the classes at my yoga studio, and there's a male teacher, but when you do yoga, I'm not sure if you experienced in this class, but it's really hard.
Yes, yoga. When I went to yoga for the first time with my wife in Arizona, it wasn't hot yoga like, Bikram yoga. It was just hot because it's Arizona and they didn't turn the air conditioning on. So I'm thinking, what is this? It's a bunch of stretching. What is this? Isometrics? Like, I didn't know what it was. Oh my God. I left and I was drenched in sweat more than I ever had been for any workout I'd ever done. And the next 3 days, I was sore and didn't even know I could be sore. And it opened up my mind to, wow, stretching really makes a huge difference. And once I started to do it, I found things that helped me, and I incorporated that into my workout routine. And, doing like downward dog and plank and doing these different things, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm noticing that there's an improvement in my abs. I'm noticing there's an improvement in my muscle tone. And yet I'm not lifting weights. It's just, there's a reason why it's been around for thousands of years. So, but I just think it's interesting that it's geared seemingly more towards women. And now that you brought that up, I was like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, no, it's totally just a societal sticker that they've put onto
interesting
yoga.
So I usually ask Don Estridge questions, but since Annie didn't go to Don Estridge, I would just include her middle school and say, what did you learn about middle school after you left when you went to high school? Was there something that you went, wow, I really wish I would have figured that out when I was there, but at least now I know it, I learned it from there, or I figured it out from there?
Yeah, so the main thing and this is kind of funny to say to people, is that I had a great middle school experience. I loved it, aside from some little, social recentering things. But the main thing about, what were you going to say?
Some little hiccups.
Oh, yeah. So something I struggled with in middle school was my chemistry class. But something that I took for granted was how supportive my teachers were. And I think my school, Fremont Middle School, is extremely similar to Don Estridge, because the teachers, put so much effort into building the students up. And that's something, again, it's just like tying back to what we talked about, how when something's in front of you, you don't, you don't realize how wonderful something is until it's not right in front of you. So just the fact that in middle school, it's an age where you can explore genuinely any avenue that you want to, and the teachers will be supportive. That's just something that I think I took for granted in middle school.
And it's funny because I've gotten that answer just because you didn't go to Don Estridge. I've gotten that answer from just about every kid I've interviewed. Yeah. So it's funny how that's why I wanted to interview you so badly, to be perfectly honest, because you bring a fresh new perspective to something, because you didn't go to this actual school that you worked, even though, Mr. Chisholm, my next door neighbor, went there. And now we're starting to get more returnees, like, Miss Verduti went there. And it's just interesting how that former students are now becoming teachers there. You didn't go there, but you still had a middle school experience. And it's interesting that here you are. Would you say Illinois, where you grew up, was more rural?
Yes. People were not allowed to ride their bikes or walk there because it was genuinely in the middle of nowhere.
Oh my gosh.
And I lived in unincorporated Lake County, which was a 15-20 minute drive to Fremont. So
what's the biggest city? What's the biggest city closest to you?
What do you consider a city?
Well, obviously not Chicago, but something like a little smaller than that. But so you're out in the country is basically what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, I'll say Libertyville or Vernon Hills, Illinois.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I get that. They may not, but I know what that is. So my point basically is that you went to school in a rural area and we're in a suburban area, but yet you similarly had the same experience as these kids. And that to me is what I'm trying to convey. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter how old you are. We've all had very, very similar experiences because we all have done the same thing. We've all gone to elementary, middle, high school. We've all had these experiences. We've all had, mean friends. We've all had to lose friends. We've gotten new friends. And that's what's so amazing about your story is that I wasn't your teacher, but yet all these questions apply to you. And all of these questions you've dealt with in your life, and that it's the same. It was just in another state in the middle of the country. And that's what I want these kids to understand, that yes, we all have problems. Yes, we all have mountains we have to climb and valleys we have to go down in and problems we have to overcome, but they're not just germane to where you are right now. Like it says, how I got here. Miss McGrath, Annie, got here by fighting over her fear of letting people know that she was in choir, and then poof, choir starts. Of then getting up in front of her classes, and then having the wherewithal to get up in front of who knows how many hundreds of people and perform in the Miss South Florida Fair, something she's never done before. And then amazingly, like this should be like a Lifetime movie. Somebody who wins, it's so incredible. So that to me is so amazing. Now the kids always want to know, and you're more recent than I, obviously, and you probably can remember. Was there a big difference in your jump from middle school to high school, whether it be the academics, the social life, whether it be your freedoms in general? Like, what was major transitional difference that you went, wow, high school's this, but middle school was that?
I think the main difference is just the freedom in what you can do with your time. But I wanted to just take a sidebar and say I do feel like I was a student of Mr. Proper's because I've only been teaching at Don Estridge for a calendar year now. And my first semester, I had no idea what was going on. And Mr. Proper was there to answer my questions. So I do feel like you were sort of my teacher.
That is so kind of you. I have, now that I'm the older statesman at the school, and I can't believe it. It's hard to believe that this is year 25, but I like to take the young teachers under my wing because I remember what it was like to not know what I was doing. You know, it's like, okay, I went to school, I student taught, but it's completely different than here's the keys to your classroom. Don't mess up the minds of these children. And, you know, when I see someone who is capable, but they feel like that's the thing. Struggle is always real. And it doesn't matter if you're 11, 23, 53, it doesn't matter. You're always going to come up with struggles. And how you deal with those struggles is how it's going to work and how it's going to go. So Annie was not afraid to come and ask me questions. She wasn't afraid to listen to what my answers were. And I'm pretty sure she wasn't afraid to apply what I told her. And if it worked, she was happy. And if it didn't work, she came back for something else. And that's what I was always taught, that now that I'm on the other end of it, I feel like it's my obligation to help out the young teachers, to let them hopefully, yeah, we all make mistakes, but I can give you examples of what happened to me. I did this and this is the outcome. But thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
No, thank you.
And again, this isn't the Ode to Mr. Proper show, but I really appreciate you saying that because it's very kind, because it warms my heart that you took what I was giving the way that I was giving it. So thank you very much for that. That is very kind of you.
It meant a lot to me, and it still does because I still ask you questions. But
yeah, and anytime, you know, Miss McGrath and I have morning duty on Thursdays and Fridays together, and we chit chat about all this stuff. That's how I know so much about her, Miss Florida Fair and her dressage, and we talk about all of our life experiences, and it's just interesting to me. And again, I'm going to hold that forever, the fact that you were so amazed that I knew what that was, because you're like, this is the most obscure of obscure horse things, and you actually knew what it was. And I'm like, and I don't even know how I did. I must have seen it on TV once and went, what are they doing? And
or maybe actually, the Snoop Dogg video.
Yes, the Snoop Dogg video. And I honestly believe I've seen it in Steamboat because I go to a working cow town. That's what Steamboat Springs, Colorado is. And in the summer, they have all these expeditions, not expeditions. They have exposés, like expos, and they also have a rodeo. And I think one time they did something where they were doing that down the main street in Steamboat. And I'm like, that's what that is, you know, and it's not a common thing. But again, I tell the students this all the time. When you are knowledgeable about a lot of different things, it just makes it so much easier to start up a conversation. And when you're knowledgeable about something that's important to somebody else, strangely enough, in a short period of time, you're going to become important to that person because you're one of the few that really understand who they are and where they're coming from. And you're not having to hide your 8th grade self of, oh man, I'm inquired. I just don't want anybody to know. And that's I think what ties people together. You know, of course we have friends who are different than ourselves and do different things, but we want to have people who at least understand where we're coming from. And that's so cool. I mean, you're interested in all kinds of things that your average person isn't, but that's what makes you specifically and every one of us a unique person. And that's what we need, more unique people. So lastly, I end this podcast every time this way, but I'm not sure if you're going to know the answer because you have only been at the Don for a year, and I don't know what you were told or what research you have done. Do you actually know who Don Estridge, the person, was and what he did?
I do vaguely. I know that he was he worked for IBM and he made the first personal computer, right?
Yeah, hold on. Where is it? Ta-da! Yeah! Woo!
I taught about last year at the end of the year. I was trying to come up with lessons that would keep the kids interested and were kind of different. And I was like, let's talk about who Don Estridge was. And they all said, we already know.
Yes. Here you are trying to be innovative. And they're like, yeah, we already did that in 6th grade. Move on. Well,
Yeah.
what's amazing is that you didn't go there and you've only taught there for a year and you know that. And I actually have students who went there who can't even remember. So as it goes, our building was an IBM facility. But for the longest time, it was a secret IBM facility. That whole area in front of my room that faces Military Trail and Lynn University was filled and packed with trees and bushes. And then IBM didn't need the building anymore, so they decided to either donate or sell it to the county, and then they wanted to make a school out of it. So they chopped down all the bushes, and all of a sudden people are like, when did they make that new school? I'm like, that building's like 40 years old. You just didn't know it was there. And so they repurposed it into a school. So if you go into Miss Joyner's room or a couple of the other science rooms, you'll notice that they have giant poles right in the middle of the classroom because it wasn't designed to be a classroom. They just reappropriated it into that. But I think that's pretty amazing that you know that, and you've only been there for a year, because there are kids who go to the school that don't even know it. So that's impressive.
I worked there, and I'm like very proud of where I work. I love the school.
As we have pointed out in this whole podcast, you are a very unique individual, and not everybody thinks that way. Some people just think it's a job. I have to go there and do my job, and then I go home. Whereas you, the Fighting Illini, coming from a completely different part of the country, are embracing this job to the nth degree, wanting to know so much. But I also see it as, you don't want to be asked a question in the middle of class and be like, I don't know. You want to be on top of what's going on.
Right, but it's really helped me in the pageant world as a title holder. I meet like a lot of important people in the community, and I rode on a float with the mayor of Boca Raton, and I met all the county commissioners, and it was important to me to talk about my school, because public education, it can come up in conversation as being controversial, or it can be, not everybody knows
right. Everybody
what's
has,
going on.
like everything else, everybody has their own opinion of what it should be to them.
Right. So it was important to me to talk to them about how great this particular school is that I work at, and how there's so much going on at the school, like the robotics.
Oh, yeah.
And all of these special things happening. So I wanted to be as informed as I could talking to these.
Right. We're not just the sports school, ladies and gentlemen. We do a lot of academics as well. Like I have won the history academic games for the county. We actually beat Bach for the first time ever in our history. And we hold a lot of titles for educationally based things. Math, they're very good at that. So it's not just, okay, we go to the gym and there's like 80,000 banners all over the place. We also have academic titles. So we are a rigorous academic school as well as a very competitive athletic school. So, wow, that was great. On that note, I would really like to thank you so much for coming on the How I Got Here podcast. And on behalf of the podcast, which is basically me, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you telling your story, because A, I think your kids are going to love hearing more about your personal life, as well as B, they can really probably connect to you as a young woman that they're going to turn into in the future. And they can say, hey, she has the same feelings I had, and look at what she overcame. And that is what I'm all trying to get out of this podcast, is to get to people to understand we all have struggles. Okay, now how do we overcome those struggles? Because we can't let the struggles define who we are. We want to let the successes define who we are. Like going back to what you said, my favorite thing is you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes, and that's what pushes us forward. So again, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was so fun.
Thank you for listening to How I Got Here podcast with Mr. Proper. Music provided by Miss Mata. Thank you to Patty Fernandez for the introduction. Thank you to Seth Proper for logistics and behind-the-scenes production. Join us next time for another episode of How I Got Here and more stories of former students and their journey.